Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The time is 6 o'clock. I'm going to call the meeting to order. This is the Historic Preservation Commission meeting of May 11th, 2022. And tonight, I am your new chair, Kyle Woodson, and I'll talk a little more at my remarks at agenda item 3. But welcome everybody and welcome to members of the audience. And it looks like we do have a quorum, Zach, so I'm going to ask you to go ahead and do the roll call, please.
Okay. Well, I think we need, let's go ahead and do that. Okay, all right, so I will take roll. So Commissioner Fackler. Aye. Commissioner Garrity. Commissioner Garrity. Okay. Commissioner Gilbert.
Present.
Commissioner Montero. Commissioner Montero.
I know she's planning to come, but she may not be logged on yet.
Okay, very good. Commissioner Karuka.
Here.
Commissioner Williams.
Here.
Commissioner Woodson. Chair Woodson.
Here.
Excuse me, and by the way, Vice Chair Fackler, I apologize. Commissioner Garrison. He told me he was not going to be available. Commissioner Larson. Okay, so we do currently have a quorum of five members. Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Lechner.
Yes.
Very good. So let's move on, please, to agenda item 1. Call to audience for persons wishing to address the commission on any matter may do so at the discretion of the chair. Do we have any persons in the audience who would like to address the commission? No. Okay, thank you. We'll move on to agenda item 2, approval of April 13th, 2022 meetings. Commissioners, you have the draft minutes before you, and I presume you've had a chance to review them. Do we have any comments or edits that are necessary for this? From our 3.5-hour meeting last month.
It only took me about 12 hours to do
Yeah.
do that. So.
Vice Chair? I do have one item that I know I spoke about with Commissioner Montero prior to the meeting, and since she's not on yet, I'll just go ahead and chime in. She thought that she had voted, oh wait, in fact, she's texting me. She says, I don't seem to have the link to the meeting. It's not in my calendar. So do you have access to your email? Lorraine Montero, Commissioner Montero. Anyway, I don't know if you are on email, Zach. Maybe you could forward that email to her again if you are able at this moment. I don't see her on. At any rate, she thought that she had voted.
I'm here.
Oh, she is here. There she is.
Yeah, I apologize.
Good evening, Commissioner Montero.
Good evening, and
we are actually on agenda item 2, approval of meeting minutes from last month, and I wanted to see if you wanted to add your comment on one of those votes you were mentioning to me before the meeting.
yes, I do. There was a nay. There was a nay vote.
Commissioner, your audio is going in and out. Could you repeat that, please?
Yes, I'm looking through the minutes now so I could find, there was a vote that the minutes read that I voted nay when in fact I abstained. And so I am looking for that so I can point you in the right direction, and it's on this other computer.
Okay, was that in regard to the 250 Rio project?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, we can, we can check that, and we'll double check exactly what was
Okay.
said, and correct if necessary.
Excellent, thank you.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Absolutely.
Any other comments or changes? Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Vice Chair.
I'll move approval of the April 13th minutes.
Thank you. We have a motion on the floor. Do I have a second?
Commissioner Montero seconds the motion to approve the meeting minutes from April.
Thank you. Thank you. And do we need to
Yep.
vote on this as well?
Let's take a
Yes.
roll call vote, a quick roll call vote. Vice Chair Fackler,
Aye.
okay. Commissioner Garrity,
Aye.
okay,
Oh, he's here. Good.
very good. Commissioner Gilbert, Commissioner Gilbert, how do you vote on the approval of the minutes item?
Aye, sorry, I forgot to unmute myself.
That's okay. Commissioner Montero,
Aye.
Commissioner Karuka,
Aye.
Commissioner Williams,
Aye.
Chair Woodson.
Aye.
Okay, that is 7 ayes and no nays.
Excellent. Motion passes. Thank you, everyone. Okay, moving on to agenda item 3, remarks by the chair. Again, good evening, everybody. Welcome. Since this is my first full meeting as chair, I'd like to take the opportunity to make a few remarks and also just a real brief introduction because not everybody here knows who I am and why I'm even sitting here. My name's Kyle Woodson. I am a professional archaeologist. I've worked in Arizona for 30 years in cultural resource management as well as in academic work. I currently am the director for the Gila River Indian Community's Cultural Resource Management Program for the last 10 years. And I am a longtime resident of Tempe as well for 27 years. And I've always loved living in this city. And this is my first commission that I have served on. At last meeting, I was apparently elected to represent the commission. So thank you, everybody, for your vote of confidence. And I'd also like to point out that we elected a new vice chair, Mr. Dave Fackler, to my left here. So thank you, Dave. And I think last month, vice chair was able to introduce himself. So you probably got some background on Dave at that time. So moving on in your packet, I've got some information and some materials that I just wanted to present to the commission. And some of this is bringing back some old documents from prior commission members and chairs, one of which happens to be sitting in the audience tonight. Thank you for being here, Ms. Gregory. But what I've got in here is Dr. Lechner put together just another role for the present commission members as well as the staff members. It used to be that years ago, the commission actually had this really nifty kind of memo format where all of the commission members were listed, all the staff members were listed right there on the agenda. And it was all right there at your fingertips. And for whatever reason, the city has decided to change their format. And I would love to have it go back to the old way because I really liked that, but it doesn't seem to be the case. So providing this information to you here. Another item in your packet is a list of frequently used abbreviations and acronyms. For those of us who are not in the community development field, there's a lot of acronyms that get thrown around. This is a nice little guide for you and maybe even for some of the staff members as well. So please take a look at that. In addition, there is in this packet Rules of Procedure as adopted by the Tempe Historic Preservation Commission on April 8th, 2010. I found this in the very handy digital archive on the city's website, which goes back, yes, that long, which is very nice. But What this shows is just a real basic intro to Robert's Rules of Parliamentary Procedure. Most of the staff who've been here, I mean, are probably well familiar with this, but a lot of people who come onto the commission as new members may have never experienced this before. So this is a really handy, nice summary of how parliamentary procedure ought to go in these meetings. And in addition to that, Dr. Lechner provided a couple of links to just some information about Robert's Rules. And I would encourage you to familiarize yourself with those if you have not done so in the past. One other item, two other items actually that are not in the packet that I did have distributed to the commission in the past was the City of Tempe has a very nice summary of the Arizona Open Meeting Law. And you're on a commission, you need to understand what the rules of the Arizona Open Meeting Law are, because you're going to be held responsible for making sure you abide by them. So we all have to make sure that we are abiding by these rules, and we are not conducting business that's meant to be conducted in public behind the scenes, including digital communications, i.e. email or WebEx. So just be sure that any of your communications are not going in opposition to those laws. So if you have any questions on that, please ask the staff members from Dr. Lechner's department if you have any questions. And lastly, there's some guidelines that the city also has on conflict of interest, because occasionally there may be items on our agenda that come up that people on the commission might actually have a conflict of interest. And if you do, you'll have to recuse yourself from those particular agenda items and voting and discussing of those items. So if you have any questions about that, again, ask Dr. Lechner and he can refer you to the proper information. Okay, that concludes my remarks, unless anyone has any questions or comments. Hearing none.
Thank you, Chair Woodson. I appreciate the, Dr. Lechner sending us out those rules, and I did review them again. And thanks for your statement.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, hearing none, let's move on to agenda item 4. Request for a certificate of appropriateness for additions to a contributing property in the Borden Homes District, Historic District, located at 1006 South Butte Avenue. The applicant and presenter is Riley Neal. Is Ms. Neal in the audience?
He's right here.
Good evening, Ms. Neal.
So I'm going to pull up her PowerPoint presentation and we'll let her do that, and then I will have some comments after that. Okay, Ms. Neal, just let me know when you'd like me to advance the slide for you.
Okay. I just want to thank you guys for taking the time to consider my application for a certificate of appropriateness for my home and a proposed addition. I live at 1006 South Butte Avenue. I've been there for 7 years in the Borden Homes Historic District. My home is 1,131 square feet, so it actually retains the original footprint currently, and it was built in 1950. My husband and I were drawn to this neighborhood and this house in particular based on really the expandability of the home. So it's a very small home on a very large lot, and it's kind of in alignment with the reason why many people moved to that neighborhood in the 1950s when they were built. So if you go to the next slide. My home is highlighted. It's in the kind of northeast corner of the historic district. It's characterized as a transitional ranch home, which basically, in my case, is a rectilinear floor plan built predominantly out of concrete masonry. It has a gabled roof, a very simple gabled roof, and some accents in tongue and groove. It, like I said, is in the northeast corner. If you go to the next slide. This is an aerial of the property. So it is fronting on both Butte Avenue. That'd be the primary frontage. That's going to be on your right hand of your screen, and then it has a secondary frontage on Orange Street, which is actually the boundary of the district. The house right now doesn't have any legal parking. The parking spaces on the north are overhanging the property line, so anything we do to the home in order to expand it, we also need to address the parking issue. So if you go to the next slide, what we're proposing is to add a carport to the north facade of the building so that it would be accessed from the Butte Avenue frontage, and that carport would be recessed from the front facade to keep that out of the historic setback and to make sure that that portion of the roof is lower than the rest of the frontage. If you go to the next slide, the second portion of the project is an addition to the rear of the property. So that would contain a primary bedroom, bathroom, and a small office area and den. That would be an intersecting gable roof. We'll see that more later on in the roof plan. If you go to the next slide. When we were laying out this proposed locations, we were taking into account, first of all, the fact that the majority of the homes in the neighborhood already do have a carport attached to the side, usually directly adjacent to the kitchen. And we did lay it out in consultation with the design guidelines. So item number 3 indicates that a carport addition cannot encroach in the historic setback, which is why we pushed it back further than the front of the building. And then secondly, that the primary addition of the room is actually at the rear of the property. It is visible from that secondary frontage on Orange, but we wanted to keep it away from the front. If you go to the next slide. To give you an idea of the scale of the addition, these are the 7 closest homes to mine. So my home is in the yellow box, 1006 South Butte. That's the proposed footprint. It would be basically bringing the structure to 1,675 square feet. And you'll see that the 7 closest homes on my street range from 2,300 square feet at the largest down to 1,332 at the smallest. So we're the only one currently that doesn't have an addition. If you go
Could
to
I
the next.
could I ask a question on the prior slide, please? Just to be clear, all the purple areas are
Are
additions to the original buildings.
Correct. So actually all the homes on my street all have the exact same original footprint, which is that 1,131 square feet that's in the gray box.
Mhm.
And then the blue is additions that are livable space. The blue hatch, the diagonal, are covered spaces.
Okay. Thank you.
No problem. So this is to give you an idea of what the changes to the property would be. That's predominantly in terms of what's going to be seen from the street are changes to the hardscape. So there'd be the removal of a paver driveway at the north of the home, removal of an existing dually block CMU fence, and then we would also have to reconfigure some turf area, some irrigated turf. At the rear of the home, we would remove an existing patio cover that wasn't original to the house either. And so the photos at the bottom are the view from the corner, and then the portion that is outlined in red dots is the portion that we would remove from the home. You go to the next slide. This is the site plan. So we would do a driveway off of Butte Avenue that would lead to a small carport covering. There is a small laundry room to the north, and the next slide will be the floor plan so you can see it a little bit clearer. And then the majority of bulk of the addition would be at the rear of the property. It has approximately 27.7% of coverage, which is well within the 45% that's allowable for the zoning. You go to the next one. This is the proposed layout. So there would be a laundry that is north of the residence. We took care to align the opening in the laundry to the existing opening from the kitchen to maintain the same relationship of the house to the street and to the side yard and parking area. And then the primary bedroom, as I kind of mentioned before, is off the back of the property with a small covered patio as well. Go to the next slide. This is the roof plan. So we would continue the gable roof to the north, but because we've pulled it back and recessed it, that portion would be lower, which you'll see in the elevations later. And then we would have an intersecting gable that would contain the primary addition. The existing HVAC system is a heat pump that's mounted on the roof, obviously not original to the home. Our hope, pending cost, is to remove that and to get a ground-mounted unit in the backyard with a air handler in the attic. But if that's not the case due to engineering or just cost, our secondary option would be just to replace the heat pump in place. So we don't want to add any additional mechanical rooftop units. If you go to the next, these are going to be your elevations. So in the bottom left corner is the front facade or the Butte Avenue frontage. And on the left-hand side is the original home. So we're leaving that completely as is. And the lower roof portion to the right side of that frontage is the carport addition. The very top elevation you see is the Orange Street elevation. That's a little misleading because the majority of that will be actually behind the site wall. So the portion that is still most visible from the street will be the historic portion. So a fence will basically be located more or less in the exact same location it is right now, which is at the line between the door and the window on that facade. The materials we're proposing are board and batten fiber cement siding. So the thought is that it gives us a little bit more durability than wood siding, but is within the language that's already established in the neighborhood. And our intent in this particular building is that because we have kind of a horizontal materiality of the home itself, that we wanted the vertical lines on the addition to differentiate. The windows, we have 7 existing original casement windows. Those would all be retained, and new windows would all be aluminum, and they would be in a dark bronze finish, which matches the existing doors in the home. The home's doors are not original to the house, and so we're just looking to match those. If you go to the next slide, these are just a couple of renderings of what the home would look like finished with the proposed scheme. So you're seeing on the right-hand side that carport, the lower roof line, obviously, of the primary suite isn't visible from this frontage, and the bottom left-hand corner is the existing frontage. And then there's one additional rendering, which is just of the rear yard. So this wouldn't, this side would never be visible from the street, but this gives you an idea of the interior of the property. That's everything I have. If anybody has any questions.
Hi, this is Commissioner Montero. Could you click back to the previous slide just a minute? Okay, I thought there was, oh, yeah, that one. Sorry, that one. Thank you. Okay, thanks.
Did you want to do Q&A, Chair, or would you like me to
Yes,
provide my comment? Okay.
First of all, Ms. Neal, thank you very much. That was a very clear and concise presentation. Thank you. Commissioners, does anyone have any comments or questions for Ms. Neal?
Not I. Very nice presentation. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Vice Chair?
Ms. O'Neill, who did your work?
Me. I work for an architecture firm.
It's very well
Aha.
done.
Thank
Very
you.
well done.
Mhm. Indeed, I would second that observation. Do I hear any other comments or questions? Yes, Ms. Commissioner Kiyomi.
Yes, I appreciate that. As a homeowner of small old house, I totally get it. Why you like to do addition, and I appreciate your approach. I think I love the board and button style, and you keeping those really nice steel windows. So I just feel that your sensitivity toward what's existing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions, commissioners? Hearing none. The staff, Dr. Lechner provided this staff summary report and analysis of the proposal in your packet. And the staff recommendation is for approval with certain conditions that are listed in the packet. And Dr. Lechner has actually cleverly provided an actual sample motion for one of you to please offer.
If I could, can I be recognized for a
Yes,
moment?
please, Dr.
Would you like me to provide just a brief kind of summary of my comments?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, very good. So yes, as the chair said, Historic Preservation Office is recommending approval of the certificate of appropriateness for this project with these attached conditions of approval. So just to note them, there are four. The certificate of appropriateness shall only be valid after the property owner obtains all other necessary entitlements from the planning division, including but not limited to, for the 20% encroachment into the Orange Street side yard setback. Number two is the property owner shall adhere to the guidelines for additions in the Borden Homes Historic District Design Guidelines document, which, as I pointed out in the staff report, is an HPC kind of authorized or approved document for this particular historic district. Number three is paint and other materials for the addition shall be compatible with the historic building while still distinguishing the addition from the historic building. And finally, four, all plans are to be approved as submitted. Any changes to the plans as submitted shall be reviewed by the Historic Preservation Officer for compliance with the certificate of appropriateness and the issuance of a certificate of a no effect. So the applicant has taken good care to abide by good historic preservation standards, to take into account the recommendations provided in the Borden Homes Historic District Guidelines. For example, as she noted in her presentation, the addition's roof lines replicate and are set lower than the historic portion, and the additions are substantially smaller than the size of the original structure. The applicant demonstrates, a commitment to using appropriate materials that adhere to the Secretary of the Interior standards, call for similar but different, that always kind of tricky phrase, as a way to differentiate old from new. Now, I did point out in the report, the positioning of the addition does not strictly follow NPS guidelines for additions, which are either to attach the addition by way of a hyphen or to set the addition back from the wall plane of the historic building. But in order to do that, the applicant would have had to relocate an existing gas hot water heater and SES panel with utilities, which would understandably be costly. So it's understandable why they would not be keen to do that. However, the additions themselves, as proposed, would be fairly unobtrusive, and as Ms. Neal noted, only partially visible from both Butte Avenue to the east and Orange Street to the north. So those are the basis. That is the basis of the HPO's recommendation of approval with conditions.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lechner. Commissioners, do we have any other questions or comments regarding those conditions as just presented? Hearing none, may I have someone offer the motion for approval?
I'll make a motion to approve the applicant's certificate of appropriateness for the proposed addition with the conditions of approval listed in the staff report. This is Commissioner Montero.
Thank you, Commissioner. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Dr. Lechner, shall we have a roll call?
Yes. So how do you vote? Vice Chair Fackler,
Aye.
Commissioner Garrity,
Aye.
Commissioner Gilbert,
Aye.
Commissioner Montero,
Aye.
Commissioner Karuka,
Aye.
Commissioner Williams,
Aye.
Chair Woodson.
Aye.
Okay, that is 7 ayes and no noes or nays.
Motion passes, and thank you, Ms. Neal, for your presentation, and good luck with your project. Thank you. Okay, moving on with the agenda, please, to agenda item number 5, request for a certificate of appropriateness for the landscape plan for the Ash Avenue Bridge abutment approach/roadbed and adjoining West Side embankment located at Tempe Beach Park at 80 West Rio Salado Parkway. This request is in coordination with the 250 Rio project. Applicant is Gamage and Burnham. Presenters are Manjula Vaz, Mike Duffy, and Mark Vinson. And just as a reminder, this item was previously considered at our April meeting.
Chair Woodson,
Yes.
Ryan Levesque, Deputy Director of Community Development. I'd just like to quickly make a statement before we get to the agenda item, and staff's going to make a presentation overview of the request.
Very good.
Just wanted to clarify for everyone in the commission and the viewing audience that this item was heard last meeting in April. There was a vote taken. There was maybe some confusion over how the vote was, if it was a majority of the remaining commission members that were present at the time of the meeting. But after confirming with the attorney's office and reviewing the regulations identified in the ordinance for Historic Preservation Commission, to move forward an item for an affirmative motion, we need a vote of 5 members of the commission to affirm a vote. So as a result of that, the motions that were made at the prior hearing were a failed motion. So that's why you see these 2 items before you tonight. We're here back with the whole team. We're hoping to provide a more condensed and consolidated presentation from staff on this item. And the applicant is here to provide any commentary or feedback or clarifications if needed for the commission. This is a collaborative effort both with the city of Tempe and 250 Rio project. There will be a future development agreement that gets brought forward to City Council in the June hearings, and those will establish some of the additional parameters by which the project will move forward with. So we thank you for this time and consideration.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Levesque. And I would also like to just, if you could just clarify, we have agenda item 5 and 6, so it's been divided into 2 different motion or items requests tonight. Is that correct? Correct.
The items have been broken up to provide a little more clarity as to the objective with the first part, which is the bridge abutment, the historic element of the roadway. And the other one is related to recommendation related to the portion of the project site that's adjacent to or fronting the historic bridge abutment property.
Very good. And thank you, Ms. Vaz and Mr. Duffy, for coming back tonight to be here tonight for your other presentation. Okay, proceed, please.
Did you have any comments that you wanted to make, or okay? No, that's fine. You don't have to.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, for your record, Manjula Vaz, the law firm of Gamage and Burnham. To North Central with me is Mike Duffy from RSP and Mark Vincent from Vincent Architects. We actually do not have any comments. I'm happy to make a small presentation. I believe Zach may have some comments that he wanted to make, but I just wanted to say for the record that we were here and that we're happy to answer any questions.
Excellent. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you for that, Ms. Vaz. So let me go back to my prior presentation. Okay, so the Historic Preservation Office is recommending approval by the Historic Preservation Commission of the Certificate of Appropriateness for the landscape plan for the Ash Avenue Bridge abutment approach/roadbed and adjoining West Side embankment with the following conditions of approval that you see here. My apologies for the small font. So the number 1, the applicant shall revisit the design to the roadbed cutouts to ensure safety and proper drainage and provide a revised landscape plan to the Historic Preservation Commission for review and comment. Two, the applicant shall continue to make the Vincent Studio PLLC's assessment of the historic roadbed and bridge abutment for the city of Tempe, Arizona. That is the title of the plan. From 2018, integral to their plan for restoring the Ash Avenue Bridge abutment approach. Three, this pertains to archaeological monitoring. Prior to the issuance of a building permit, the developer shall provide the city with an archaeological survey of the property conducted by a qualified person or firm to ascertain the presence and to review and assess the impact of archaeological artifacts or ancestral remains that may exist upon or otherwise impact or affect the property. If such artifacts or remains are required by applicable law to be removed, relocated, preserved, or otherwise remediated to permit development of the property, then developers shall diligently undertake to satisfy all such legal obligations at no cost or expense to the city. Four, the certificate of appropriateness shall only be valid after the applicant obtains all other necessary entitlements from the planning division. And five, the certificate of appropriateness is for the landscape plan that is dated April 12th, 2022. Any changes to the landscape plan as submitted shall be reviewed by the Historic Preservation Officer for compliance with the certificate of appropriateness and issuance of a certificate of no effect. So just a couple of few comments about what they have proposed in the landscape plan. As Mr. LeVake had alluded to, the city is strongly behind the project. The Historic Preservation Office supports the project as well and supports with these conditions of approval attached, as I mentioned, issuance of a certificate of appropriateness for the landscape plan. The applicant has made a strong effort to adhere to sound historic preservation principles. I think it's telling that its plan, almost note for note, replicates Mr. Vinson's 2018 plan, as many of the commissioners can personally attest to, since many of the commissioners were able to join myself and Mr. Duffy and Mr. Vinson on tours of the Ash Avenue Bridge abutment roadbed. That roadbed is in very poor condition, and the area itself is really an eyesore that clashes with the rest of the revitalized area nearby. The developer is offering to rehabilitate the roadbed in such a way that preserves its historic features and prevents them from further degrading. And this should be pointed out, the city simply does not have the funding to do this, which is why it's sat in that condition for decades. The roadway itself will be covered over with a material that, if removed, will not damage the historic roadbed underneath. The roadbed cutouts, which the developer is willing to redesign and relocate for proper drainage and safety based on the prior version of the plan that you saw then presented in April, as well as historic markers, will help pedestrians to understand the history of the old Ashland Avenue Bridge and its approach. I think another major part of this is the western embankment. It's another historic feature. It will also be preserved under the landscape plan. The idea there is to merely stabilize it and to add some landscaping. So it's kind of hard to see the developer's landscape plan. I think it's anything but a kind of a win-win for the city. I think both in terms of economic development, but even more important, of course, for our purposes here on this commission, in terms of historic preservation. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lechner. And before I open the floor to commissioners' comments, I would like to just thank the presenters for offering the tour that you did provide, and Mr. Vincent, Mr. Duffy. That was very instructional, and I know that the commissioners who were able to go on that did benefit greatly from that tour and the discussion. So thank you very much. Okay, commissioners, we have the floor open for comments or questions.
This is Commissioner Montero. I just have a suggestion for number 3 for conditions of approval, that it be the beginning part of that sentence mentions archaeological monitoring rather than survey, just because you know, a survey at this point would be of little value there. There's no bare ground. And based on the findings of some of the, properties nearby, the monitoring seems like either monitoring or testing would seem like the logical condition.
Thank you, Commissioner Montero. Any other, anything to add or any other comments about that particular matter regarding
This
the
is-
archaeological?
Yes, thank you, Chair Woodson. This is Commissioner Garrity. I would just second, I would be going to approve this motion with just some cleaning up that item 3. I'm just kind of building on what Commissioner Montero said. I would just say probably a qualified person or firm should evaluate the property and make a determination, or actually make management recommendations about whether testing or monitoring, or just some kind of reasonable approach to assessing what's underground. Because again, as Commissioner Montero said, we won't be able to tell anything from survey. However, a qualified person or firm can if a qualified person or firm makes a recommendation for some kind of either monitoring or testing, I think that's the way to go.
Thank you, Commissioner. So I would like to interject a comment here, and Dr. Lechner, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the next agenda item, which is more specifically in regard to the project generally and some of the other aspects of that and not just the abutment, does call for archaeological monitoring as a condition of the approval in that other motion. So I know there's overlap here, obviously, but the particular motion we're talking about here is more specifically in regard to the actual Ash Avenue Bridge and abutment and approach, and the abutment along the other edge of it, correct?
Correct, yeah, and yes, I'm, excuse me, I'm looking at the next agenda items, conditions of approval, and they are, I believe, identical to, so it's still referencing an archaeological survey of the property. But certainly if the commission is, would like to, substitute monitoring for survey, that can be certainly included. Yeah, and it's helpful to keep in mind too that as part of the development agreement with the developer and the city, that archaeological monitoring is a condition of that. So this is kind of just kind of covering bases that are already covered, but that's as the HBC, and because of its purview, it's understandable. So we can certainly include a substitute monitoring for survey in this condition and the other when it comes up.
Thank you, and I'll also just observe there's a slight discrepancy in the original wording in the staff report as opposed to the wording that's on the screen at this moment for item number 3. So I think that might have thrown off maybe the commissioners, but
okay, sure, fair enough.
But I would just think that the same condition, since it looks like it's more or less duplicated in both of these items, that they basically just reflect the same recommendation that the commissioners seem to be recommending. Does that sound appropriate?
It does sound appropriate. I did have a question for Commissioner Garrity. I wasn't quite sure of the language change that you were suggesting. So I know that there was a request by Commissioner Montero to change archaeological survey to archaeological monitoring, and then Commissioner Garrity, I just wasn't sure what additional change you were proposing in regard to the qualified person or firm.
Well, thank you, Dr. Lechner. What I meant is I think whoever they hire for the qualified person or firm should make a management recommendation for either monitoring or testing. Commissioner Montero brought up both possibilities. And I think, that would go to presumably your office for approval, and I'm not sure if it would come back to this commission or not, but I just thought that would be the way to go instead of tying them to monitoring. Let the archaeologist, whoever they hire as a qualified archaeologist to make that assessment and make that recommendation.
I agree Commissioner Garrity. I think the way you're proposing that verbiage would fit both of these different agenda items.
Well, I presume that,
It's a
oh, I'm
little
sorry.
more flexible.
And I presume that the commission would want, but, not necessarily, monitoring and testing potentially, right? Not just one or the other.
Possibly.
Okay, so monitoring, we could change the language to monitoring and or testing. If
Commissioner Garrett again, I think that's, I mean, I would just say you could go either way. I think you could make a reasonable argument for just monitoring or just testing or both. So I would just leave it to whoever the qualified archaeologist recommends.
Okay, so whoever makes the
consultation.
motion can feel free to amend the language, and then the HPC can vote accordingly.
Let me also just add another comment and perhaps reference, Ms. Vaz, a question to you. Because you were the developer on the 100 South Mill project, correct? Which is basically right across the street. Do you recall what the approach was there for the archaeological? Did you do the test excavation as in advance, or was it simply monitoring, or what was the approach there?
Mr. Chair and members of the commission, on the at Hayden House, which we can talk about, and Mark was talking about what's going on. It was a little different in that we were going underground, as you may remember or know from 100 Mill, versus the way this building is done. But I think in terms of the commission's recommendations, monitoring or testing will work for us. As Ryan mentioned, we're working with the city, and we have similar language in our development agreement, so we're happy to do that, and we've talked to the qualified architect, so we'll let her make a decision. I think that's fine.
Okay, thank you.
If that works.
Yeah, I personally, I don't remember the details of that project, although I've been there, of course. I
Yes.
don't know exactly what you're referring to when you say underground. I mean, you're still going to
There's a
have to-
parking garage,
There's a
so
parking
there's an
garage.
underground parking garage on that property, I'm sorry. And so we dug underground versus
Right.
this parking garage is going to be above ground, so we're not digging as deep as
Right.
on 100 Mill.
Right, but there's still going to be demolition of the property, and there's going to be earth moving. into
Yes,
the
and so
property
we'll-
whatnot.
yes.
So, right.
And
So
we're-
I think it sounds like we're all on the same page
Yeah.
here then, with just making sure the language is kind of commensurate with whatever the approach was there, given your
Yes,
proposal.
yeah,
here.
and
So,
I would
very
agree with
good.
Commissioner Garrity that if it's going to be monitoring or testing and let the archaeological firm decide, that'd be helpful.
Okay.
I put
Commissioners,
something.
commissioners, does that sound acceptable?
Yes.
Excellent. Very good. Do I have any other comments or questions?
May I?
Yes, Commissioner Kuroka.
Just it's typo, I think, on page 7. It's the excerpt from June 9, 2022. And also page 7, after staff recommendation, page after that. And next paragraph, it said, the completion of Mill Avenue Bridge illuminated the need for the Ash Avenue Bridge. I guess it's supposed to be eliminated.
Commissioner, sorry, could you be more clear? Which page are you referring to and
Page
which
se-
document?
Oh, sorry. It's item 5, Ash Avenue approach report.
Are you referring to the staff report, or are you referring to the full presentation from the developer?
I'm not sure. This agenda item number 5, the document PDF stuff.
The staff report? Okay.
This one? This one, and same thing on both document, agenda 5 and 6.
Oh, yes.
Oh, okay, I see.
Yeah, that should be June 2021.
And it's the illuminated the need. That's it.
I actually think that, thank you, Commissioner. If I could maybe just get Dr. Lechner to clarify that portion of your staff report, is that an excerpt of minutes from that meeting?
Correct. That's an excerpt of minutes from the June 2021 meeting in which the folks that we see here today. Mr. Duffy and Ms. Vaz had given just kind of a preliminary presentation. So I think there was a desire, I think, on their part to provide the commissioners, particularly those who had not been with us on the commission, well, myself included, but had not been on the commission at that time, to just kind of give them the kind of proper and full context to kind of what this commission had heard before in relation to this project. So yes, so what she's pointing out, yes, there was a typo. My apologies. Yeah, it should have referred to the June 2021, not 2022 meeting, which of course has not happened yet. So.
Okay, all right, thank you. Thank you, Commissioner. Any other questions? Okay. Yes, thank you, Mr. Abramson. Any other questions or comments from the commissioners? Hearing none, I think then we have need for someone to make a motion, and there is a sample motion in your packet from the staff report.
Just noting the amendment to that language, and if for whomever makes the motion.
Yes.
Yes.
Can I get someone to make the motion, please?
Commissioner Montero moves to approve the applicant's request for certificate of appropriateness for this plan, subject to the conditions of approval with that amendment to condition number 3 that suggests prior to the issuance of a building permit, the developer shall arrange for an evaluation by a qualified archaeologist that will recommend monitoring and/or testing as appropriate. I put it in the chat box.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'm trying to scroll so I can actually see what you said there. I can't see it. Thank you. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second from the Vice Chair. All right, shall we take a vote?
Absolutely. Vice Chair Fackler,
Aye.
Commissioner Garrity,
Aye.
Commissioner Gilbert,
Aye.
Commissioner Montero,
Aye.
Commissioner Karuka,
Aye.
Commissioner Williams,
Aye.
and Chair Woodson.
Aye.
Okay, that is 7 ayes and none opposed.
Excellent. Motion passes. Thank you. Okay, so this is going to be a somewhat similar item. Moving on to agenda item 6. This is also a request for, this is not a certificate of appropriateness. So now this is where you've divided it out. We have a request for recommendation of Development Review Commission approval of a general plan land use map amendment from public open space to mixed use, and a density map amendment from no density to high density urban core more than 65 DU. What does DU stand for? What? Dwelling units per acre. A zoning map amendment from GID and R16 to CC, a planned area development overlay to establish development standards, and a development plan review for a new 14-story office building with ground floor, commercial for 250 Rio, located at 250 West Rio Salado Parkway. The applicant is Gamage and Burnham. The presenters are Manjula Vaz, Mike Duffy, and Mark Vinson, and this item was also previously heard at the April 2022 meeting.
So HPO is again recommending HBC approval of this item. Essentially, this is a recommendation would be a recommendation if approved for the HBC to kind of move the item to recommend approval to the Development Review Commission, or DRC, for these particular items, which are all going to be kind of necessary for the applicant to gain overall approval of the project. So don't really have any other kind of specific comments in regard to that. other than just noting HPO support for a motion of approval.
Thank you, Dr. Lechner. Commissioners, do you have any questions or comments in regard to this item? Excuse me, I didn't have my microphone on. I am not seeing any hands raised on the WebEx crew. Therefore, I'm guessing there are no other further comments or questions. So we have a sample motion written in the staff report, and I will ask one of the commissioners to please make the motion.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Vice Chair.
I move approval per the sample motion.
May I be right? I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but just want to know if the commissioners would like to, or Vice Chair Fackler, if you'd like to amend the conditions to reflect the conditions of approval in the prior item.
Yes, I would include those.
Okay.
Thank you, Vice Chair. There is a motion on the floor. Do I have a second?
Commissioner Montero seconds the motion.
Thank you, Commissioner. I think we are ready to vote on this item.
Vice Chair Fackler,
Aye.
Commissioner Garrity,
Aye.
Commissioner Gilbert,
Aye.
Commissioner Montero,
Aye.
Commissioner Karuka,
Aye.
Commissioner Williams,
Abstain.
okay, and Chair Woodson.
Aye.
Okay, that is 6 ayes, none against, and 1 abstention.
Motion passes. Thank you again to the presenters for returning, and we appreciate your efforts on this and to abide by the conditions of the 2 agenda items that were approved.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Okay. All right, 1 hour in, I'm going to see if I can keep this less than 2 hours this time instead of 3.5 hours. Okay, moving on to agenda item 7. This is a request for approval to forward the updated City of Tempe Historic Preservation Plan to City Council for adoption. The presenter is Tempe Historic Preservation Officer Zachary Lechner. Dr. Lechner.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Just going to bring out my PowerPoint. Okay, so yeah, I would like to try to keep this brief, but in the staff report attachment, you received some very lengthy documents. In some ways, I apologize for that, but at the same time, it is a positive thing because it reflects, I think, the very good work of our consultants, Archaeological Consulting Services, who have done really very fine work in putting together both the Historic Preservation Plan and 2 inventories of historic resources in the city of Tempe. I'm going to make, obviously we're on the first of those agenda items for, this is agenda item 7, to again forward the updated City of Tempe Historic Preservation Plan to City Council for adoption. But in this presentation, I will discuss mainly the HP plan, the Historic Preservation Plan, but I'll also make a few comments about the two inventories as well. I am Zach Lechner, the City of Tempe Historic Preservation Officer. So I'm kind of coming in kind of late to the game with this plan, and happy to be in the position of presenting what I think is a very fine updated historic preservation plan to you. Our lead consultant on this project is Archaeological Consulting Services. We have 2 representatives from ACS. in the audience today, Thomas Jones and Andrea Gregory, and also their sub-consultant from Vincent Studio PLLC, doing double duty today, Mr. Mark Vinson. So we appreciate all of their very fine work creating this plan and these inventories, and also working diligently with the city to make various revisions. So the current City of Tempe Historic Preservation Plan, for anybody who has taken a look at it recently, will know that it is it's a very quick read. I'll put it that way. It's takes you about 90 seconds to read through it. But of course, length is not a marker of quality. However, in this case, it's not an issue of quality. It's just an issue of the fact that the City of Tempe has changed quite a bit in the last 25 years since this plan was instituted. So obviously, Tempe is in many ways a different place. It's a city that is kind of being developed rapidly, expanding economically in many ways. And so it was felt that there needed to be an updated historic preservation plan to to kind of represent and in many ways, I guess, account for these changes. So in particular, kind of the meat and potatoes of the plan is the goals and priorities section, which is kind of towards the end of the document. And that in particular needed to be updated and expanded to kind of give a full scope of various needs of the city of Tempe in regard to historic preservation. So the objectives, there are a few of them. So first, the goal here in updating the historic preservation plan was to take a look at the existing plan, take a look at kind of current historic preservation ordinance in the city of Tempe, and also just the processes of what we do in the Historic Preservation Office, as well as on the Historic Preservation Commission. Just take a look at where essentially things are working and where there might be areas for potential improvement. There was a next part of that was to take a look at taking a look at the existing plan and ordinance, making sure that applicable laws and regulations that had been put on the books since 1997 were satisfactorily addressed. Third, it was very important to the city and to the consultants that various stakeholders were consulted. So that includes, just to name a few, the Arizona State Museum, the State Historic Preservation Office, Arizona State Historic Preservation Office, I should say, the 4 Southern Tribes were critical partners in this update to the plan. And then finally, the objective here with the update was to, of course, actually go about implementing the policies and practices that would be consistent with the plan. And that is kind of something that will be happening, in the coming months. So I want to give you a little bit of an idea here about outreach efforts, which many of us are familiar with. There were public meetings and presentations that were held in April and October of last year. A public survey was conducted in, I guess, last spring or spring of 2021. It yielded about 52 responses. I included a link to those survey results so you could get some thoughts from various residents about just the plan and the larger issue of historic preservation in Tempe. Tribal representatives were consulted on multiple occasions, especially throughout 2021. There was consultation with this commission, the Historic Preservation Commission, with various staff updates by my predecessor in the Historic Preservation Officer role. Now, I say here the HPC gave it a preliminary approval, the plan in November 2021. It actually just fully approved it for forwarding it to City Council. And so I want to explain why we're back again asking for approval to send it to City Council. We do realize what happened. However, after this vote was taken by Historic Preservation Commission, Mr. Southard had, had resigned the position. I moved into the position, and it was thought by the community development department that it would be helpful for me to be able, because I would be, a person who would be primarily tasked with implementing these goals and priorities outlined in the plan, that it would be important for me to weigh in and to in some ways, kind of put my own stamp on the plan. So I've had an opportunity to do that. Although I will say that, the revisions that have been made to the plan since the commission last saw it in November, are largely based on improving the readability and accessibility of the plan. And there have been a few changes to goals and priorities and things like that. So the increasing readability was another reason to revise the plan further. The Tempe Historic Preservation Foundation was consulted in August 2021, so that was another stakeholder group whose input was sought. City agencies were consulted for their input back in the late winter of this year, and we did send the plan to the SHPO for review back in March. I know they received it, have not received a response from them, and I can only assume that they love it and they have nothing to add to it. It's kind of how I'm going to interpret that. And so we've been doing just kind of ongoing revisions to the plan, continue to happen. Even as some commissioners have, already kind of sent me comments, and we've worked those in, and those are online, and so we're able to kind of make those changes very quickly. A plan draft was made available for the public in May this month, and then there was additional outreach, I should mention, to the 4 Southern tribes as well at their monthly cultural resource working group meeting in April of 2022. Just to highlight a couple of changes that had occurred, including the kind of the timeline implementation of the plan, and we received kind of minimal comments from that meeting. So just want to mention a few of the kind of main components of the plan. Really, even before the vision and purpose, there is an executive summary, which is one of the additions that was made to the kind of the previous update of the plan. So the executive summary is one of those items that was instituted to try to improve the readability and the accessibility of the plan. So the idea is that someone who has maybe kind of a passing interest in historic preservation doesn't want to read a 100+ page plan. So not the folks on this commission, of course, but just someone who just kind of, hey, I need to kind of quickly know what's going on with historic preservation in the city of Tempe. They could read this 2 or 3 page executive summary and kind of get a sense of it. So there's that. The vision and purpose is outlined, legal basis for preservation. There's a very interesting and helpful kind of prehistoric and protohistoric cultural history, or culture history, I should say, section. So a lot of kind of Native American and archaeological information there, or related to that history. The city of Tempe is covered, its history, its architecture, different cultural heritage groups in Tempe, including African Americans and Mexicans and Mexican Americans is included. A section on tribal perspectives, because again, that was a primary kind of an animating principle of this was to seek tribal input on kind of all aspects and stages of the plan. There's a discussion of the kind of the current historic preservation program in the city of Tempe, various planning considerations, meaning the kind of the preservation environment, things that we want to know or need to know if we're going to be doing historic preservation in the city of Tempe, and then those historic preservation goals and priorities. So the goals, there are 7 of them, main goals. So the first is, and there are priorities that kind of fall underneath each of these goals. So the first is to increase public outreach and support. Second is to improve interdepartmental coordination. Third is to augment property designation and review processes. Fourth is to implement city planning and policy improvements. Where we are. Fifth is to enhance procedures related to archaeology and repositories. Six is to expand tribal consultation and coordination. And then seventh, smallest section, but not the least of them, to encourage interregional historic preservation coordination. So they all kind of fall, or they're all kind of, I guess, animated by these two main principles, which are kind of not surprising for a historic preservation plan. The first being to document and to encourage preservation of the city's cultural resources. I mean, that's the main reason that the plan is there. But we also wanted to, in particular, expand outreach to the tribes and to incorporate their input on a whole variety of issues, from handling, how to handle sensitive cultural resources, to how to expand tribal access to various sacred sites, and then also just how to kind of enlarge the concept of consultation with tribal members, kind of beyond just kind of federal definitions of things like Section 106 consultation, which are of course mandated by federal law. So we wanted to kind of think about ways that we could develop those relationships in ways that are not just kind of consulting with the tribes when we have to, but forging those and developing those relationships kind of outside of federal required consultation moments, I guess. Okay, so that's the HP plan. There's also an inventory of two inventories of historical resources completed by ACS. These have been completed for some time now, for over a year, I believe, for both of them. These are being proposed, and you'll see this is agenda items 8, but I'm just going to go ahead and mention these now. These are being proposed along with the Historic Preservation Plan by the Historic Preservation Office and Community Development Department to the HPC with a request to forward them to Council for approval. So the first inventory covers the years circa 1868 to 1960. The second inventory, the longer of the two, covers the years 1961 to 1975. Obviously, there's just more, extant historical resources from that era. But both offer guides to different, property types, different construction types. Just provide ample information on historic properties and also their eligibility. So kind of listing them, dividing them each up individually often. And so I think that these inventories, I mean, these, are just, I think will be very critical resources for helping the Historic Preservation Office and helping the Historic Preservation Commission kind of figure out ways to, moving forward over the next, few decades at least, figuring out, kind of what properties need to be targeted for preservation in particular. So these are going to be great guides for doing that. Just a real quick mention too, the other kind of leg of this kind of three-legged stool of the HP plan and the inventories is a blanket archaeological monitoring, discovery, and treatment plan. This isn't, keep in mind, this is not up for consideration at this point because it is not yet completed. It's been delayed by the pandemic. It's being carried out by Logan Simpson. And so the goal here is to develop a plan that can, identify various archaeological sites, canals, prehistoric canals, and traditional cultural properties or TCP. So the idea is to, as I say here, is just in the slide, is just to provide a consistent approach to the treatment of Tempe's historic or archaeological cultural resources in order to streamline the historic preservation consultation process by identifying a set of approved field and research methods for monitoring and discovering situations for the city. So it's a mouthful, but essentially it's trying to kind of regularize procedures related to archaeology and encounters with cultural resources in the city. So next steps, we are in one of the next steps here, which is presenting this draft plan and the inventories to you all on the commission. May 26th, we are on the agenda, so, anticipating a favorable result with you all this evening. We are on the agenda for City Council. So City Council, the request there is for them to adopt the updated historic preservation plan and for them to adopt the 2 inventories of historical resources. And if there are any delays, which, things happen, we have June 9th, the June 9th City Council meeting as a backup date to present the plan and inventories for approval. So just some context here. I'm kind of the primary lead on this issue, obviously, but other folks who have worked and are working on this in the Community Development Department, and Biga Adhikari, my immediate supervisor, and then Robbie Aaron, who you all know, most recently, currently on leave, but interim historic preservation officer as of last month, and then Andrea Gregory, from our lead consultant from Archaeological Consulting Services, and Mr. Jones as well, playing a very active and key role in this process because this plan is theirs. They created it along with Mr. Benson and other fine folks. So we appreciate their help very much. Okay, so that is my presentation on both items.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lechner. Very good summary. Before I open up the floor, I'd like to make some remarks on this plan. Very first thing, I want a big tip of the hat to the consultants, Archaeological Consulting Services and Mark Benson. Outstanding job with compiling and updating this. It's long overdue. I think it was an outstanding job. You've really made some extremely progressive, I'd say, recommendations in this plan, and I think that it's something that this city really needs moving forward with historic preservation. So number one, thank you very much. Really appreciate it, and the city definitely made the right choice. Number two, I do want to acknowledge the prior HPO, John Southard, and Alex Smith, his former colleague here in city, for their efforts in organizing this and the collaboration and coordination. This definitely could not have happened without their efforts on this, and I'm very appreciative for the both of them, who both have moved on from the city at this point, but I do want to make sure I acknowledge both of them. The other thing that I would like to say is that now that I've been tasked with being the chair, I've had a little bit more time to look at not only the public input to the plan, but I also took a look at some of the character area plans for some of the neighborhoods, which is a really important component for the city's visioning for the future. And there's unbelievably strong support in all of these areas of the city for historic preservation and more of it. And now, because clearly every day we move forward, we have the possibility of losing more and more of our historic and cultural resources and adverse impacts to those that are still in existence. As Dr. Lechner actually mentioned in our handout, he mentioned also that another thing is that the public wants more incentives for historic preservation. So I'm going to have a big, giant, motion of support, so to speak, informally, that is, for that. If there's anything we can do to get the city to increase incentives and opportunities for property owners and other entities, businesses and organizations to get on board with historic preservation, we need it, and we need it now, because the rate at which we have now lost so many of these resources is we've got to get something in place to help that situation. So really pleased overall with this plan. The other thing I'd just like to point out is I'm also very pleased with the inclusion, the very prominent inclusion of tribal coordination, consultation, and cooperation with the city in the historic preservation planning, the visioning, and moving forward from this point. completely absent from the other plan, which obviously is 25 years ago, but this was a really important part, I think, of moving the city forward. And I think it goes very nicely hand in hand with, it's just barely been over a year ago that the HIT city adopted the recognition statement of the Native American communities whose land the city is now occupying. So that was really important, and I thought also a very timely, proclamation to make last year. And this plan, I think, really nicely follows up with that proclamation in the inclusion of tribal perspectives in this. Okay, those are my initial remarks. So I'm going to now open the floor up to commissioners' comments, questions, anything else to do with the plan.
Can I actually be recognized for a moment?
Yes, Dr. Lechner.
Okay, thank you very much. And I just to save time too, I just wanted to mention if there are any kind of comments that you have kind of related to things like typos or kind of relatively minor things that you feel need to be changed in the plan, you can certainly please just you can email those to me, and I'll be happy to get those incorporated and changed ASAP. But I don't mean to discourage discussion. I just wanted to mention that I would ask anyone who's made any comments on a paper copy or a digital copy, please just forward those to me. This really hopefully ASAP, so I could see about getting those changes made. Thank you.
Thank you, and understood. And while I will support that, I do want to encourage any other discussion or comments and try not to be too nitpicky with the editorial things. But I mean, honestly speaking, for this body, now that we've had a number of new people on the commission, this is really the first opportunity in a meeting setting we've had to discuss this particular plan. And make no doubt about it, I mean, this is probably one of the most important things that this commission has dealt with, in my opinion, probably in recent memory. I mean, there's lots of other little really important things, but this one is going to have a really lasting effect. So by all means, I would like anyone who has any other comments, questions, or anything else that they'd like to add, please. The floor is yours now. Yes, Commissioner.
So I do appreciate it. It used to be 2 pages, now 103 pages. So it's a great work and a great first start. And I feel a little funny commenting on the plan already approved once by this commission, but however, you did ask me, so I have comment. I think all good content, but however, I feel it's not ambitious enough. It's clearly, this historic preservation is underfunded in the city. The city even can't afford Ash Avenue restoration. And all these things listed here, it all costs money. And I do not see how it's going to be funded. For instance, art and culture plan, as I recall, I think the art tax was part of master plan, and I do not see how, we can say whatever we want, what should be, but if it's not, there's no funding mechanism. I don't know how it's going to happen. And as Mr. Chair, I totally agree. I read that. I have to confess, I didn't read everything, 103 pages, but I did read the public Tempe forum. There are the urgencies in the comment about what's happening in Tempe. And I just feel this is not ambitious enough to change the tide to me. And also, what was I going to say? Yeah, so anything we could help, but if anything, I would like to be more ambitious. It's similar to arts and culture plan. They listed very concrete next step and like years. I think it had a schedule like 5-year, 2-year, or immediate plan, 2-year plan, 5-year, 10-year, something like that. And it was very kind of something you can follow rather than just ideas. So I understand there's a lot of effort went in, and its forward scope was different from the art and culture plan. Obviously, that was the more bigger plan because there were multiple public meetings and multiple, I think, surveys. It was just the scope is different. For it wasn't funded, like this one wasn't funded, but just if we could expand, I would really appreciate so we can carry this plan to the reality, like incentives. They talk about incentives of the public, and I see that here and there about like getting some fees waived, but I feel like they're asking more. So, thank you.
Yeah, and I appreciate your comments, Commissioner Kuroka. So yeah, I mean, in terms of implementation timeline, that it's stated in the plan that the various essentially will be in motion on the goals and each of the goals and priorities within 1 year of adoption by City Council. And I think in general, the kind of the idea for this plan is it's kind of something we revisit, like in another decade or so. And although that could certainly be changed if seeing the need for it. In terms of incentives, I agree with you, and we've kind of had conversations within our department with kind of the financial folks in the city, and kind of seeing like, hey, what can we do? So those are definitely ongoing conversations. Certainly the city of Phoenix has, for example, used bond initiatives to fund various historic preservation projects, including support for kind of individual homeowners who own historic properties. So that's something that we haven't kind of gotten definitive word back yet from the correct entities in the city of Tempe government, but it's something we're working on. So the language that was used, because we couldn't get a definitive answer at this point, was a little bit tentative, to just, we're investigating it, but that is definitely something we will continue to do, because I read those comments too, and I also understood the urgency in them, and real concerns from people, and also just a great interest in historic preservation, and we want to make sure we honor those things and honor those ideas and do what we can to support them. So I appreciate your comments about the ambitiousness of the plan. We always want to push as far as we can in terms of historic preservation, and while at the same time having to respect certain limitations that we have. City ordinance kind of limits what we can do. So sometimes we're only in kind of an advisory role to maybe encourage council to at some point to make additions or amendments to city code to provide greater protections for historic properties, and you'll see those recommendations listed in the priorities. So definitely understand where you're coming from and appreciate your comments.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Kuroka. I agree with a lot of what you're saying as well. Does anyone else have any comments or remarks they'd like to make?
I do. I apologize. I'm trying to raise my hand, do the icon, but it doesn't seem to be working. Commissioner
It does look
Montero,
like it just, Commissioner, I do just see that it came up, and I missed that.
oh, okay. I agree that with Chair Woodson that this is really a wonderful plan, and Dr. Lechner, I really like it. I enjoyed reading it, and I just have a couple of questions, and one of them is about the archaeological site on 8th Street that was identified, the big foundation. And I wonder if it would be appropriate to include a photograph of that, but I also want to hear Commissioner Williams' comment on that. I don't know whether that's too sensitive to include, but it is, it strikes me as one of the more significant findings that, really in the lower Salt River Valley in the last, several years. So I was kind of wondering about. And I also wondered about, there's a list of historic contexts, but not, nothing for prehistoric contexts. I'm just curious about that.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Montero. So the photographs, so we could maybe have some discussion about that maybe outside, and I'm not sure if you're familiar with that particular project area, Dr. Lechner, but I agree, it was an extremely significant discovery, and there's some great photography that maybe ACS, I'm not sure if they had access to that or not, but it's something I guess we could consider in there. And then your second point was, can you repeat that one more time?
Yes, you know, and it's just a question. I'm just wondering why there isn't any list of prehistoric contexts for Tempe. You know, there's a list of historic contexts, but I think there have been some really interesting findings over the last few years, and maybe there are some prehistoric contexts that need to be proposed. It's just a question, really. I want to see what everyone thinks.
Yeah, can we recognize Andrea Gregory from Archaeological Consulting Services to address that?
Indeed, Ms. Gregory.
Thank you.
Hello.
Welcome.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having us. Lorene, your question regarding prehistoric context, I think I would recommend that, you know, the document that Logan Simpson is working on in terms of the Class 1 and the kind of blanket plan for monitoring, discovery and treatment would probably be the more appropriate document for that information. We've tried to, the information that's presented in the HP plan as it's drafted right now is kind of very high level, you know, and that's to avoid basically presenting too much detailed information about context that might be, you know, restricted in terms of their distribution to the public. So we've kind of tried to go at the overview level for those, and then reserving more detailed context discussions related to prehistoric resources to that other document that Logan Simpson is working on. Does that answer your question?
That makes sense.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. Yes, it answers my question.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Great, thank you.
Oh, and then regarding the 8th Street question, I don't know if you also want me to speak to that, but
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yes,
I mean,
please.
I would absolutely defer to the tribes in terms of whether or not that, you know, photographs would be appropriate to share with the public. So, I mean, that's kind of one of the things that has guided us through this process. I mean, this is a very public document that's being used by a lot of different audiences. So in preparing the tribal perspectives component of the plan, we've tried to be mindful of what information is appropriate to distribute to the public versus information that would be more restricted in its distribution. So I don't know if Commissioner Williams has input on that, or if that's something that might need to go to a broader tribal audience to answer.
Yes, I'll recognize Commissioner Williams, and I will get to your question, Mr. Adhikari. I did see your hand up. I'll get back to you in a moment. Commissioner Williams?
Hi. Yeah. I know that the 8th Street project was pretty significant, you know, what was encountered, and I think that would have to go before the 4 Southern tribes to get approval, just because of the significance, but also, you know, there was during that consultation with City of Phoenix, there was previous discussions about the project in that area specifically, about how to incorporate it into the landscaping of that area. Because we know that it has been preserved and in place, and whatever. I don't know what the status is of that project along 8th Street, but I can talk to Salt River Tipo and Hill River Tipo to see if they would like to see the photo in there. Because I'm not sure if they've seen this latest draft of the historic preservation plan and the photos that are in it. But that would have to be discussed with the tribes.
Thank you.
Thank
Commissioner.
you.
Let me chime in here. I will observe that there is on page 16 of the plan, there is a description of this discovery on the 8th Street project, and there is a figure that displays just sort of a general map of the site known as La Plaza. There is not a picture of this particular feature, but it is described in the document. So it is in there, but we would need to get, I guess, some further instruction from the communities regarding including a photo.
And maybe it isn't appropriate at this point. It sounds like it might not be appropriate to ask that question.
And I might add that maybe this would be something worth adding into the document that Ms. Gregory was referring to, which is the blanket monitoring and discovery and treatment plan. There will be more chance to discuss this, so maybe that could be there'll be some more time, I think, with that document that this could be addressed at that time.
I agree. Yeah, I appreciate the comment. I think it's probably best to probably move forward with trying to send this to council pending HPC approval. I would regret if held that single thing held it up, but it's certainly something we can talk to Logan Simpson about in consultation with the tribes about including in that blanket monitoring and treatment plan.
Agreed. Commissioner Montero, does that sound reasonable?
It does. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Could you also unraise your hand, please? And the chair recognizes Mr. Adhikari.
Do it.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Woodson, and also Commissioner Karuka. This is Ambika Adhikari, Principal Planner in Community Development. Really appreciate these comments and questions, specifically the questions raised by Ms. Karuka. I just wanted to give a very brief explanation that these kind of plans are more policy level and advisory, and a lot of things gets done by what the city adopts as a matter of policy. And so once if this is adopted, then what happens is the advancing of the incentives and many of the programs go step by step, maybe in different years. Then the Historic Preservation Office will seek for some funding to implement some of those things, go through a lot of budgetary process. And like Jack was mentioning, sometimes if it's really a large thing, then it goes through a bonds. Very minor things, we either get some money from the tribal purse or the city itself. And then those things go through a budgetary revisions and process. So I really appreciate that concern that some of it has to be implemented. Obviously, once the plan is adopted by the council takes it seriously, and any of the things that we take one at a time or a couple of them at a time from the staff, we come to you when we propose anything and go through a budgetary process. So those kind of things would continue on as a part of the art and process of the plan. At this point, the plan is the culmination of what the HPC suggested, what the community gave input, what the staff, what the consultants and professional people thought was the kind of best put forward, given that we only had a 2-page document that was adopted in 1997. So this is a policy level guiding document, and in terms of implementing and finding money, we can do that in future once the plan is adopted. Thank you for your time, and if there are any further questions, I'm also here.
Thank you very much for those comments. I appreciate that. And I would support those proposals as we move forward with this. Any further comments or questions from the commissioners? Okay, hearing none. We have, Dr. Lechner, is there anything else we need to address with this?
I don't believe so. I think we can
No?
move on to if someone would like to make a motion.
Okay, yes, there's a draft sample motion in your staff report. I'll ask for a commissioner to make a motion, please. Mr. Vice Chair?
Just a point of order, can we combine 7 and 8? We've discussed them.
I don't have a-
I don't know. I'll interject. The answer is no. We're going to consider them separately.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would agree, but the 8th agenda item could be considered very succinctly if you would like, of course.
I move the approval of the request to forward the document to the city council for their approval and adoption.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Motion on the floor. Do I have a second?
I second the motion. Commissioner Montero.
Thank you, Commissioner. And I think we're ready for a vote.
Okay. Vice Chair Fackler,
Aye.
Commissioner Garrity,
Aye.
Commissioner Garrison. Oh, should not be on there. I'm sorry. I forgot about that. Sorry. Got it a little bit out of order. Commissioner Gilbert,
Aye.
Commissioner Montero,
Aye.
Commissioner Karuka,
Abstain.
Commissioner Williams,
Aye.
and Chair Woodson.
Aye.
Okay, that is 6 ayes, 1 abstention, and no opposed.
Okay, motion passes. Thank you, everyone. And again, thank you to the presenters and the consultants. Excellent work. Okay, moving on to agenda item 8, which obviously is linked to the Historic Preservation Plan, as was described by Dr. Lechner. This is the request for approval to forward 2 inventories of Tempe historical resources to City Council for adoption. The first is an inventory of historical resources circa 1868 to 1960 within the urban core of the city of Tempe, Maricopa County, Arizona, and an inventory of historic resources from 1961 to 1975 within the city of Tempe, Maricopa County, Arizona. Both inventories were completed by Archaeological Consulting Services and their subconsultants at the request of the city of Tempe. And the presenter here again is HPO Dr. Lechner. Do you want to add anything else?
No, I don't believe so. Yeah, just again noting our request for approval to forward those 2 inventories to City Council for adoption. Happy to answer any questions as our consultants here as well.
Thank you, Dr. Lechner. The chair would like to make some remarks before I open up the floor. Again, I'd like to commend the consultant on this exhaustive research. I can only imagine how much effort this required, going from Google Earth Street Views to actual looking at these on the ground. It's really quite a feat. I will make a couple of observations for the purposes of the commissioners and the meeting. The inventories do not include the entirety of the city of Tempe. There are exclusions, as noted on page 33 of the first inventory. So for example, there are no buildings from ASU property are included in this. So one of the very first things I looked for was ASU Old Man. I'm like, where is it? And then I realized that they're excluded, and that is by specific request. But there's also a number, this does not include the residential housing subdivisions. Those are completely covered in separate documents. Parks, flood irrigation structures, as well as a few other odds and ends. So just to be clear, this is not the complete inventory, so to speak, of historic properties and resources and cultural resources for that matter. But it is pretty exhaustive. So again, thank you very much, but I just want to make sure that that's made clear. So there are other resources that have to be referenced in regard to us as a commission and the city moving forward with, you know, our historic preservation planning and preservation efforts. And also that I know that the first document there wasn't a sort of an existing prior inventory that had partly been done in the past, but this was an update. But the other one is more or less brand new, so that's a lot of work. So thank you very much for your diligence on this, and we're all going to benefit from this moving forward. So thank you very much. End of my remarks, and I'll now open the floor to any other comments or questions from the commissioners. Chime in if anybody has any questions or comments. None? Once going twice? Again, thank you everyone. So I believe, again, there's a sample motion that's written in. So I will. I'm talking without my microphone. Hopefully you could hear me. I'll entertain a motion from one of the commissioners at this time.
Okay, Commissioner Montero makes a motion to approve agenda item 8 for providing these 2 inventories to council.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Second.
Motion on the floor. We have a second. Thank you, Vice Chair. We have a second. I think we're ready for a vote on this item.
Very good. Vice Chair Fackler,
Aye.
Commissioner Garrity,
Aye.
Commissioner Gilbert,
Aye.
Commissioner Montero,
Aye.
Commissioner Karuka,
Aye.
Commissioner Williams,
Aye.
excuse me, Chair Woodson.
Aye.
Okay, okay, vote is 7 in favor and 0 against.
Outstanding. The motion passes. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you again to the presenters. And we look forward to revisiting this document as we move forward with other properties that come up to our attention in the future.
Can I just mention one thing? Part of the deliverables that you all aren't seeing is there will be a GIS spatial data set that goes along to the city's HPO. So they'll be able to reference specific historic buildings that we have recommended as historic eligible. Again, this isn't a full determination. This isn't going through consultation in terms of for a formal Section 106 process, and it doesn't necessarily preclude, you know, a formal evaluation of any of these properties in the future. But at least there's a baseline data set for the city to use in the future. So hopefully that will be helpful to the commission as well.
Okay, thank you. I'm glad you brought that up. So, because you mentioned that these documents did go to the SHPO office. So,
Right.
So there's no consultation on this at all, or is there, what was the purpose of that? Was that just for feedback, or was there an actual consultation request?
Well, yeah, the inventories did not, as far as I know, did not go to SHPO. So the HP plan did. Because typically that is kind of the purview of the SHPO, is to review a city historic preservation plan and seek feedback. And so yeah, there was a request for feedback, and yeah, we just have not received it at this time.
Very well. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank
Ms.
you.
Gregory.
Thank you very much.
Excellent. Okay, thank you, everyone. All right, moving on in the agenda. Let's move on to item 9, chair and staff updates. The chair has a few updates and remarks to make. First of all, I already mentioned some of this before. I just wanted to acknowledge thanks to the commissioners who made the time to go out to the Ash Avenue Bridge site visit. And again, thank you, Mark Benson, who's still here, and to the others who've already left for giving us that tour. That was really useful, and to get some discussion out there. And Zachary, thank you very much for that. I really appreciate that. I wanted to make a point that I'd like to thank the city for the event last Friday, which was the Boards and Commissioners Appreciation Event, which I attended, and so did Commissioner Garrity. And I want to just recognize that Commissioner Garrity was recognized for serving for 5 years or more on a commission of the city, and he got his photo with the mayor and the rest of the group and was acknowledged amongst the group. So congratulations, Dr. Garrity. And anyway, the event actually was really quite nice. It apparently was the first time they had this event since 2014. And it was at the Tempe Center for the Arts. Anyway, you guys missed a pretty good event. So next time they have this, be sure you go. It was quite nice, and I'm very appreciative of that. I'm going to be kind of stepping on Dr. Lechner's toes. I'm just going to kind of let you take it from here, but we do have an update on the Butler House conservation easement that occurred since our last meeting, and it was not on the agenda today, which in thinking this through, we probably should have had it on the agenda, but maybe you could just give us an update on that, Dr. Lechner.
Yeah, and yeah, I didn't put it on the agenda just because we kind of had sent an email update from Mr. Levesque and kind of indicating that the property owner had signed a facade conservation easement on April 19th. At its April 28th meeting, City Council approved a resolution for the facade conservation easement, as well as a waiving of processing fees associated with the lot split and a zoning map amendment, historic preservation overlay. So currently, community development is working on hiring a surveyor to prepare a subdivision plat. Community development is also looking to schedule a neighborhood meeting for the property owner and neighbors on the lot split and the historic overlay amendment. And we will continue to keep the commission updated and informed about the process as we've been doing.
Thank you very much.
Did you want to add anything else, Mr. Levesque?
Yes, thank you, Chair Woodson. At the hearing for City Council, we did receive some potential concern or opposition to the request. I think it was more so concerned that maybe the property owner was receiving some incentive or favors for the facade conservation easement. Again, we went through some extensive negotiations to try to get them to a point to basically avoid filing for or completing a demolition process. And that is also part of the approval too, is that they've now waived the demolition permit application. So that's now null and void. Glad to hear that. But as part of this neighborhood meeting input and outreach, we're likely to get some more additional feedback from property owners or neighbors in the area as to maybe how they feel about the request. There will be an item that has to go to the City Council for the plat approval request. And then, of course, to make modifications of the historic property overlay designation, that amendment will obviously have to come back to you all as a recommendation for that request. So there will be future public hearing items on this request that'll involve actions by the Commission, DRC, and City Council.
Great, thank you for that update. And again, thank you personally to your efforts in getting this individual to agree to this, because that did not sound like that was very good possibility, last year when this item first came up. So very appreciative of your efforts on that. Thank you much. And I guess we'll be hearing more on that. Are there any other staff updates?
No, none at this time. I'm just still considering, just one other thing, I guess I wanted to thank the commissioners who had taken a moment to send me some suggestions for the CLG pass-through grant, which I believe June 23rd is the deadline for that. So we got some good suggestions and just trying to kind of, mold those over and, kind of figure out what the best application would be to put together for that. So I'll give you more information as that develops. And that's all for staff updates.
Thank you.
Chair Woodson?
Yes. I
Oh,
can't
this is
see who's
Jared
speaking.
Smith over at Tempe History Museum.
Oh, yes, Mr. Smith. Yes. Go ahead.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I'll just provide some updates on upcoming programs for the
No, just
museum.
point of order. I'm sorry. Could we actually just move that to the next, cover that under the agenda item 10 for current events, announcements, and future agenda items?
Right. Yes. If you could just hold a moment there, Mr. Smith. And I did have one quick question. So the CLG grant proposal, is that an item that would need to be reviewed and approved by this body, or is that just a city action that's not required to go through us?
I mean, it's not, it's not necessarily required to go through Historic Preservation Commission, but it's something that I wanted to kind of feedback on. So it's not even a sure or guaranteed at this point that there will be an application. I know that in terms of kind of the order of funding, it kind of depends on, which CLG was, or certified local government, was, last funded. So I think we in Tempe are currently in the middle of the pack, which is not to say that we wouldn't, receive funding. But I do think it's worth, applying for, because it is free money. You do have to have a match in terms of funding, or just in terms of time, so that of up to 40% of the amount that's being applied for. So yeah, I just had received those comments, and just to kind of working to kind of figure out what the best option would be to apply for something for that grant. So if there are any other comments, you can certainly feel free to email those to me or call me, and we can discuss those. So, but I wanted to not just have it be an executive decision, and again have the input of the commission, certainly. So, but it's not necessarily an item that we'll need to vote on per se.
Very well. Thank you. Note taken. Okay, if that's all for staff updates, then we will move on to agenda item 10, current events, announcements, and future agenda items. So we have member announcements and staff announcements, and I'll hand it over to you, Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Chair Woodson and Zachary Lechner. I'm going to just give a quick idea of what's going on at the museum through the end of this month and into June. So at the museum last Friday, there was a performance by Francine Reed and Friends, and that was a successful event. And as with our performances at this time, they're indoors in the community room, and I don't think we want to be doing too much in the way of outdoors at this point, knowing that our weather is tending to fluctuate a little bit, which means that our next performance at the museum, which is an acoustic night with the Sun Punchers Trio and Jesse Valenzuela and Mark Zubia. That's going to be Friday, May 20th at 7 p.m. And I certainly encourage everyone to look at, go to visit the museum's website and check out the calendar for those. And then in June, beginning Wednesday the 1st and continuing each Wednesday through the end of July, I believe, with there may be a break for around the 4th of July, although I don't think it falls that time this year. In any case, each Wednesday is going to be the Tempe Time Machine event, which is our usual summertime program. This year, each of those Wednesday events is going to be focused on Tempe sister cities. And each event will feature one or even a pair of sister cities as it goes. But again, I encourage everyone to check out the museum's calendar and Facebook page for that. And let's see, the time on those, I believe, is about 10 to 2. in the afternoon on Wednesdays from in June and July. Again, check the museum calendar for specifics and for each specific sister city. And again, in conjunction with the sister city exhibit that's up at the museum right now, which I encourage everyone to come see. It's really excellent and a fine celebration. We even had the mayor of Cuzco, Peru, come visit, which was quite excellent. And you don't often get the mayor of a major historic South American city to come visit. And that was pretty neat to see. And also coming up at the on June 18th, Saturday, June 18th, we're going to have a Juneteenth celebration at the museum. And that's going to be, again, Saturday, June 18th from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. And we certainly encourage everyone to come out and join. History of, again, Juneteenth being the end of, the marked end of slavery and focused on Texas in 1865 with the announcement that became the Juneteenth celebration that effectively ended slavery in Texas. But of course, that celebration has gotten, wider since then with diaspora of African American residents from Texas, and of course, we even have in Tempe in the early 20th century, we had some local residents who worked on the celebration. It was down in Tucson, so a lot of history to Juneteenth. Actually connected here to Tempe even over 100 years ago. So come out and join us for that. And again, check out our calendar, see what all is going on. I won't be at next month's meeting. Brenda Abney will return to provide updates for the commission. I will, I'll probably be around for some additional meetings in future. Certainly will be attending various meetings, but I've really enjoyed working with everyone, and I look forward to it. And I know Brenda looks forward to getting back and joining the meetings again. So thanks very much for your time, and thanks very much for the meetings as well. Bye now.
Thank you very much for the announcements, and also, yes, and farewell to you. We will definitely miss having you at the meetings, and it's been a pleasure to have you here and giving us your updates and your insights. So I'm sure we'll see you around. It's probably not the end, but take care of yourself.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I'll be around. Certainly, if you have any history questions or need to look at some historic resources here at the museum, I'm always available to assist with that.
Thank you, Jared.
You're quite welcome.
Thank you. Okay, do we have any other announcements from anyone?
I can just briefly kind of give you some potential future agenda items. So recently I received a couple of communications, one from the Arizona State Historic Preservation Office, noting that the town of Guadalupe has submitted a nomination to the National Register for Guadalupe Cemetery here in Tempe. So that is kind of currently under consideration. I believe that kind of the state board will consider that in July. And so look for that to be an agenda item at the June meeting of the Historic Preservation Commission. Because the way it works is, a Historic Preservation Commission, or AKA a certified local government such as ours, it's within our purview to review and provide comment on National Register nominations for properties within the city. And so they're requesting our feedback on that nomination. So I'll be forwarding that to you in the coming weeks prior to the meeting, and we'll have an agenda item where we all can kind of discuss or make any comments that we'd like to forward on to the board, who will be considering that in July. And then another kind of a related note is that the town of Guadalupe is also planning to, or has sent me via snail mail, a request to nominate Guadalupe Cemetery to the Tempe Historic Property Register. So that would be a designation, request for a designation. That would be a process that would first start with Historic Preservation Commission. Historic Preservation Commission would then potentially make a recommendation to Development Review Commission, which would then make a recommendation to City Council that would actually finalize the designation if it so chose for that particular property. So I'm not sure of the timeline for that particular process, if that would be an item for the June meeting, but I just wanted to let you all know that you know, that we may soon have another addition to the, or at least we have another nomination for an addition, another designation to the Tempe Historic Property Register. That is all for me.
Okay, thank you. May I ask, so the nomination is coming from the town of Guadalupe?
Yeah, I received a letter. There was the Tribal Historic Preservation Office, and now I'm sorry, I'm terribly sorry, I'm blanking on which tribe it was. I apologize. Had sent the request on behalf of the town of Guadalupe. The request included not only a letter, kind of a justification from the TIPO, or Tribal Historic Preservation Officer, but also a letter of support from the mayor of the town of Guadalupe as well.
That would be Carl Herrig, TIPO for Pasquayaki.
Yes, thank you. I'm sorry.
Actually came up in our meetings with them during the HP plan discussion about the Pasquayaki. There was interest from the community.
Yes. Thank you. I apologize.
Okay, so, and so what I'm getting at, the nomination is coming from the Yaqui community in the town of Guadalupe.
Right.
But the property is in the city of Tempe.
That's correct.
So do they, pardon me?
The property is owned by the town of
He said, yeah, he said the property is owned by the town of Guadalupe. I believe. I'm not actually sure.
Could you explain, please?
Per the property record card and the county assessors, town of Guadalupe owns the cemetery.
So it's like a
Within
island
this-
property within the
well,
city of Tempe?
Within the,
It's a weird situation.
we've got City of Phoenix owns property in Tempe as well, and Scottsdale.
I see. Okay. So in other words, there's no act that what I was getting at, which is basically now a moot point apparently, is that the city doesn't have to provide some type of permission for that. That's just a comment since it's not city property apparently.
The city of Tempe doesn't have to
Right.
provide any. Well, the city, yeah, no, I mean, the city of Tempe would actually, the city council will actually make the determination because since it is city of Tempe property, it would still have to go through the jurisdiction. Yeah, I'm sorry, not property, but it's under the city of Tempe jurisdiction. Even though it's owned by the town of Guadalupe, it would still go through the required process for designating a property in the Tempe Historic Property Register, which is outlined in the Historic Preservation Ordinance.
Sure. No, I understand that, but I'm talking about the National Register nomination.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah, again, because it is under, it's within the city of Tempe jurisdiction. Yeah, it would still run through this CLG. Yeah, this Historic Preservation Commission for review. It's not. There's no this commission. It's really more of kind of a courtesy, to have this commission review it, or any kind of CLG review a National Register nominated property within its jurisdiction. Just this kind of, a kind of an advising consent type of situation. So, yeah, it doesn't preclude the nominated property from being ultimately approved. It's just really just kind of a request for feedback, and that's all. So it's nothing that this commission, for example, couldn't say, oh, we're gonna kill that nomination. It doesn't have that kind of authority. For example.
No, I mean, and I'm not suggesting that,
Yeah.
but I mean, that's news to me. I mean, it just seems to me that, if, and I'm, irrespective of whether it's the town of Guadalupe or anyone else, I mean, if there's a property that's in the jurisdiction of the city, you're saying we don't actually have to approve of the nomination going forward at all? That doesn't sound right.
I'd have to check on that. My understanding is that, yeah, the procedure is that it has to go through the commission, but ultimately it's the state board coming out that's housed within the SHPO that ultimately makes the decision on whether the nomination is approved. So,
It was my understanding that you had to have the approval of the landowner for sure, but what you're saying is the town of Guadalupe owns the land? I'm still confused by it. This is something that we need to have come to the agenda next month. I would recommend that we have that on the agenda next month. Can we do that?
yeah, sure.
Okay, with more explanation about all this, because this is, I mean, you're saying it's going before the board in July?
Hmm.
Okay, so that's kind of a fast track for us. So, yeah, if that's something you could share with us, maybe even preliminary information, if that's possible via email or something, I'd like to hear more about this.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. We can certainly do that.
Thank you. Great. Anything else from staff or other members? Commissioner Williams, you have a hand up, but it looks like it's applause. I'm just trying to make sure. Did you want to say something, or were you applauding something?
I was applauding on Commissioner Garrity's receipt. Yeah, his award. And it won't
Indeed.
go away. Sorry.
Yes. I should mention, and Commissioner Garrity, well, two things. First of all, there were certificates of appreciation for all of the commission members there. So at some point, you might actually get that. I don't know how those are going to be distributed, but just FYI, all of you actually had a certificate. And Commissioner Garrity, was there another commission member that's been on the commission for 5 years or more? I'm trying to remember if there was someone else that also got recognized but was not actually present.
First, I did receive the certificate. Thank you, Chair Woodson, and thank you also, Ray Lynn, for your applause. I'm the only one. I currently on the HP Commission who's been here 5 years, which I hadn't even realized until I received the email inviting me to the event. So a lot of people termed out in the last year, so I guess that leaves me as the Wiley Veteran Commission.
Aha. Okay. Yeah. I know that Commissioner Garrison's also been on this commission for quite a while. I'm not sure if he was on. I only mentioned
it's quite 5 years. Yeah.
Yeah. I thought they were saying a lot of names there, and I may have missed it. I just want to make sure that for the record, we recognize that here because it's a worthy of mention here. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. I think that about covers it. Is there anyone else that has any other announcements or updates? Okay. Wait a minute. I see someone chatting.
No, I just said congratulations, Chris. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, right. I can't even
Sorry.
see all this stuff.
Thanks, Larry.
There's so much stuff on my screen here. Very
Sorry.
good. Okay, so I think this concludes the meeting. So can I have a motion to adjourn, please?
So move.
Motion on the floor. Do I have a second?
Second,
Second.
Commissioner Williams.
Thank you, Commissioner Williams. So we are adjourned then at 8:13 p.m., I believe. We don't have to vote on that, do we?
Hope
Oh,
not.
yeah.